say that in the exam hall, you have 7 minutes for a 10 marker question or 11 minutes for a 15 marker question, these minutes are not meant entirely for writing. So Gandhi talks about ahimsa, that is peaceful resolution of the conflicts. When you write a mains answer, you generally write in terms of introduction, body and conclusion. But when you're thinking about the question, then you have to think first the body part and then the introduction and conclusion. In exam, if you want to write a good answer for any given question, if you do not have much idea about it, but you have a good command over the UPSC main syllabus and the keywords, you can frame a very good answer. But for that, you need practice too. Hello aspirants, consider this scenario. Two aspirants, equally meritorious and capable, both of them clear the UPSC prelims exam, writes the mains exam, but when the final result comes, one of them gets into the IAS, the other does not even qualify. What sets them apart is their approach towards the UPSC mains exam. And when we talk about the UPSC mains exam, answer writing becomes quite crucial. So, you may be aware that in the UPSC mains exam, there are 9 papers in total, out of which 4 are of general studies. Each general studies paper is of 250 marks and you have to complete that within 3 hours or 180 minutes. Now, given the current pattern of the exam, in each GS paper, you have 20 questions in total, out of which 10 questions are of 10 marks each and you have to write a 150-word answer for that. And the next 10 questions are of 15 marks each, for which you have to write a 250 words answer. Now, given the time boundation of 180 minutes, for each 10 mark question, you have approximately 7 minutes in the exam hall. And for the 15 mark question, you have approximately 11 minutes. Now, what happens in the exam hall? Let me take you through 3 scenarios. The first being, the student reads the question, goes blank, delays writing the answer, and then ends up writing whatever he knows. The second scenario, the student reads the question, identifies some familiar theme therein, feels relieved, and starts writing. In the third scenario, the student reads the question, identifies the theme, then what is being asked with respect to that particular theme via the keywords, and then starts writing. In all these scenarios, the student is missing either one or the other thing. Because when we say that in the exam hall, you have 7 minutes for a 10 marker question or 11 minutes for a 15 marker question, these minutes are not meant entirely for writing, because the answer writing process consists of multiple steps. And the initial 3 steps written over here have to be done within 1 minute, and that comes only with practice. Initially, it may take you 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or even more than that. But gradually, this time will reduce with practice and it has to come to 1 minute, that is 60 seconds. Now, first thing first, you have to read the question and understand the demand of the question. How that is to be done, I will be teaching you in a while. After having understood the demand of the question, try to break the question, if possible, into parts and subparts. And then, with respect to each part and subpart, recollect the content that you have read. Or if you do not have any ready-made content fodder for a particular question, then you have to take help of certain frameworks. For example, the commonly used PESTEL approach: political, economic, social, security, technology, legal, environmental, humanitarian, etc. To basically give multidimensional approach to your answer. Or you can go for the stakeholder approach. Stakeholders, the people involved in that particular case. Next, you have to structure your points. You have to logically arrange them so that they link with each other. Then you have to go for value addition. Now, value addition is basically like garnishing your answer. So, herein you have to go for relevant data, reports, committees, case study, if you have any with respect to the theme asked, or relevant maps or diagram. Now, you have to draw very simple diagrams in the form of flow chart, Venn diagram, hub and spoke model, basically to give visibility to your answer. See students, what happens is, actually the examiner is checking multiple answer sheets in a particular day and he or she has a very limited time. So he does not get the time to read your question answer entirely. Generally, they scan through your answer sheet. They try to look for certain keywords and whether you have addressed each part of the answer or not. If you have incorporated relevant maps, diagrams, data, reports, committees, case studies, and you have highlighted those for the examiner, you are basically easing up his task. And so he will award you with better marks. Once you are done doing this, understanding the demand of the question, what is being asked, breaking it into parts and subparts, then recollecting pointers with respect to each part, subpart, or framing the answer therein if you do not have any ready-made answer, using the help of frameworks, structure, and then value addition, then only you have to start answer writing. And in the exam hall, for each question, these starting 3 steps have to be completed within the initial 60 seconds. And those are very crucial. Now let me teach you how to understand the demand of a particular question, how to decode a question in the exam hall. The first example, this is basically a question from UPSC previous year mains paper. The question is, highlight the importance of the new objectives that got added to the vision of Indian independence since the 20s of the last century. 250 words means this is a 15 marker question. And now you can easily identify that this particular question is from the General Studies 1 History Freedom Struggle portion. Indian independence since the 20s of the last century means Indian freedom struggle between 1920 to 1947. Basically, the Gandhian phase. So the question theme is the Indian national movement or the Indian freedom struggle during the Gandhian phase. Theme. Next, what within the Gandhian phase? The new objectives and their importance. So these are the keywords. The key objectives and their importance, relevance or significance. How they basically broadened the Indian national movement beyond a political independence. And then there is a directive word over here, highlight. Highlight basically means what? Highlight basically means explain briefly. Explain briefly. You don't have to go much into depth, but the coverage should be wide. The answer should reflect multidimensionality. Now explain. So you basically have to think in these terms. First, what new objectives, what new objectives got added during the Gandhian phase? Then, on what basis you can say that these objectives got added and why they got added? You have to think on these lines. And then next, the importance or relevance of these new objectives. Now, importance is also to be think along 2 lines. During freedom struggle and post independence. post independence. For example, how these objectives have shaped our constitution, our preamble, constitutional ideals, and also the policy making. So this is how you think. Let's have a look at the detailed answer for this particular question. New objective. First, complete independence or Purna Swaraj. Now, how we know this was added? Because of Lahore Session 1929. Why it was added? Because our previous demand of self-rule, dominion status was not paid heed by the British government, the British Indian administration. And how is it relevant? It basically laid down the foundation of a sovereign democratic republic. Next, social reform in the form of upliftment of the depressed classes, the scheduled tribes, the scheduled caste, the Dalits. Next, women empowerment, the Gram Swaraj, communal harmony, which is quite evident from the constructive program during the Gandhian phase. And why they were added? Because we were facing these problems. Untouchability was a problem. Next, the rural areas, they were lacking behind. Women empowerment was needed. And also communal harmony, because the Britishers were following the policy of divide and rule. How it basically had an impact on the Indian national movement? It emphasized the point that political equality or political independence without social justice, social equality has no meaning. It also broadened the social base of the Indian national movement, making it a true mass movement, having democratic ethos. Post-independence, the influence is clearly visible on our constitution, our policy making. You can see various fundamental rights or the directive principles of state policies, or the Panchayati Raj reforms in the form of 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment. We talk about decentralization, participatory governance. Next, the peasant and the labor welfare. How this is evident? The Karachi Resolution of 1931 talks about it. The economic program plan that was adopted herein. And also with the rise of the Kisan Sabhas, the trade unions, and the Congress Socialist Party. Now, why these? This was because of the popularity of the communist and the Marxist ideologies. Gradually, people were becoming aware of their rights, politically aware, the role of the nationalist leaders, and also Gandhi's role. And then the significance. It is basically trying to score the point of economic justice, right? And also, it broadened the base of the Indian national movement, and later on, it played a very significant role in the acts like Zamindari Abolition Act or in the land reforms policy of the government, etc. Similarly, mass mobilization, secularism had become very essential, protection of the rights of the minorities, protection of their culture, and also anti-imperialist internationalism. This was basically a precursor to the non-alignment movement and India's role in the global issues. So you have to basically think along these lines. Let's take one more example. For example, this is a question from UPSC Civil Services Mains 2018. And the question reads, throw light on the significance of the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi in the present times. Now, let's do the same exercise. Let's first understand the demand of the question. And how we do that? We try to identify the theme. So what is the theme over here? The theme is thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi or Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. Okay. What is the keyword? relevance in present times. So, theme and keyword, these have to be identified. So first you have to know about Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, his ideas with respect to governance, with respect to economy, with respect to environment, with respect to social justice, etc. And then you have to interlink how those are relevant in present times. For example, in present times, we are talking about climate change, we are talking about sustainable development, sustainable living. We are witnessing geopolitical conflicts. We are talking about ethical governance, right? We are talking about inclusive development. So all these can be interlinked with the Gandhian thought, the Gandhian philosophy. Fine. And the key directive over here is throw light. Throw light. It means what? Explain. In explain, what, how. So what are Gandhi's thought with respect to various dimensions and how they are relevant in present times? An interlinkage between the two. So, for example, Gandhi talked about Gram Swaraj. We have gone for the 73rd, 74 Constitutional Amendment Acts, and Panchayati Raj is the third tier of our governance. We talk about decentralization and participatory governance. Then Gandhi was talking about the concept of ahimsa, which is so relevant in present times when we are witnessing the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We are seeing the US-Iran tension and violence conflict in other areas too. So Gandhi talks about ahimsa, that is peaceful resolution of the conflicts, countering violence. Along with that, in present times, we are talking about sustainable development, as I mentioned earlier too. We are talking about climate change. Our Prime Minister talked about the concept of life, that is living for environment, sustainable living. Gandhi talks about environmental simplicity. He says the earth has enough to satisfy everyone's need, but not for men's greed. Then we are talking about cleanliness, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Gandhi talks about it. Cleanliness is next to godliness. We are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are talking about vocal for local, right? We are talking about sustainable economic growth. Gandhi talks about the concept of Swadeshi, self-reliance. We are talking about corporate social responsibility, ethical capitalism. Gandhi talks about the concept of trusteeship, how the businesses are basically, or the corporates are trustee on behalf of the entire society. So they have a responsibility towards the society. Now, apart from that, we talk about inclusive and equitable development. Gandhi talks about the concept of Sarvodaya, Antyodaya. Then we are talking about ethical governance, transparency, accountability, good governance. Gandhi is talking about Satya, truth, honesty, probity. So think about the present day concerns or the present emphasis on various aspects and link it with the thoughts of Gandhi. Now, apart from this, you need to understand that the directives are very important, right? So what we have done, we have listed the important directives which are commonly found in the UPSC exam paper for you, along with their meanings and what you need to do when you see those directives, because these directives basically set the tone of your answer. So please go through these and these will be quite helpful. You can take a screenshot of this also. Next, see. Okay, so fine, PYQs are one way in which you can learn how to write the answer. Fine. The next thing is, answer writing should not be limited to PYQs only. Even if you are reading a book, a chapter, you should basically think of it in terms of a mains answer. So brainstorming is a exercise that you need to do on daily basis. For example, you are going through R.S. Sharma. I teach history, so I'm taking example from therein. And you are reading the Vedic age. Now, therein you will find social organization as one of the subtopics. Now, while reading through the social stratification topic, you should see what all components have been included over there. For example, social stratification and social hierarchy, social inequality, on what basis? It may be on the basis of varna, it may be on the basis of caste, it may be on the basis of gender, it may be on the basis of power or economic class. Then the position of the women from multiple aspects, the religion belief system. Then you should think in terms of the social institution, the status of family, marriage, kinship, etc. You can briefly also include the pointers with respect to material life and political organization therein, because society encompasses everything. And while reading about each of these components, you should also keep on asking yourself the questions like what, why, how, and the consequences, implications, or the issues. Now, this is true not only for your books or the content specific material, but also in case of the current affairs as well as any situation that you witness on the roadside. So, anything that you see, anything that you read, it should be basically thought in terms of the mains answer writing structure. For example, recently, the Supreme Court of India declared that the right to walk on footpath is a fundamental right. But then the paradox is that while traveling to your friend's place or maybe to your coaching institute or to some other place, you witness rampant encroachment of the footpaths. Now, how you will think this in terms of a mains answer? So, the question that should be triggered is, first thing, what is encroachment? The next question that should come into your mind is why? The reasons behind the encroachment. And then the issues, implications involved therein. And next should be resolution. You have to think in these terms. See, when you write a mains answer, you generally write in terms of introduction, body, and conclusion. But when you're thinking about the question, then you have to think first the body part and then the introduction and conclusion. How you can write introduction and conclusion? I have certain ideas which I have included at the last. So you can just go through those. We'll discuss briefly that too. So first is, what is encroachment? Why this encroachment? What are the issues, implications involved over here? And how to resolve that? And when we're talking about resolution, it should be short term, medium term, and the long term, the sustainable solution. In these lines, you have to think. Let's think about this problem now. So, the first thing first, the issue at hand is the footpath encroachment. Encroachment means what? It is not meant for that purpose, for which it is being used. For example, as you can see, the vendors selling vegetables, fruits, or people parking their vehicles on the footpath, etc. Footpath encroachment. First question is why? Now, I can address this why as per the GS papers. For example, in GS1, you have social issues topic. And within social issues, you have a topic population and associated issues, wherein you read about urbanization and migration. Right? So you're aware the expanding urban informal economy and the demand for cheap labor. Secondly, you are also aware of the fact that in rural areas we are witnessing agrarian stress. Agriculture is no more remunerative, and there are very less alternative avenues available as far as livelihood is concerned. So people are forced to migrate to urban areas, leading to overcrowding. Urban informal economy and the rural urban migration. Fine. Along with that, you also need to keep one point in mind that our urban planning traditionally have been automobile centric and the interests of the pedestrians have been neglected. So, faulty urban planning can be another reason. Apart from this, what? We have certain acts like Street Vendors Act of 2014, according to which we had to, yani, the municipal corporations had to set up separate vending zones. Not only this, there had to be town vending committees. A survey had to be done and iCards had to be issued to the street vendors. But none of this is operational. Add to it the corruption, the rent-seeking behavior, or the parallel hafta economy. So, there are institutional and legal bottlenecks. I have interlinked this to paper 2. Apart from this, then the next thing that should come into your mind is, after why, what are the issues? So you generally must have witnessed that encroachment on the footpath leads to pedestrians on the road, and this means traffic congestion. So one of the reasons behind traffic congestion. Traffic congestion. Now traffic congestion has implications in the form of what? First, loss of productive hours. Loss of productive hours. Next, in terms of air pollution, it also increases the logistics cost. Also, encroachment increases accident proneness, especially of the pedestrians. This is directly a violation of the right to life. Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Not only this, this also basically denies the elderly, the women, the children, the Divyangjan, the specially abled people, their dignity and also their right to free movement. So, this is also in contradiction of the fundamental right of free movement, Article 19(1)(d), and dignity, that is Article 21. Then there are certain ethical issues involved. There are certain ethical issues involved. The dilemma is what? We are talking about the convenience of the urban pedestrians on one side, and then there is issue of survival of the poor, the street vendors who have encroached. Then there is issue of enforcement on the part of agencies and empathy or sympathy towards the street vendors, the hawkers. So in this manner, I have mapped this particular case that we generally witness on the roadside along the GS 1, 2, 3, 4 papers. Then next comes the resolution. Whenever you're thinking in terms of resolution, you have to basically think about a short-term solution, a medium-term, and then long-term, which is sustainable, long-lasting. Short-term resolution will be what? Enforcement. That is, the vendors will have to be evacuated from the footpaths. Then, if we talk about the medium term, the town vending committees, the spatial surveys have to be implemented. The town vending committees have to be operationalized. Spatial surveys have to be carried out. There should be accountability of the enforcement agencies. Next, if we talk about the long-term solution, this will be in the form of urban planning and design. So, in our Sustainable Development Goal 11, we talk about inclusive, sustainable, resilient cities. So, while going for urban planning and design in the future, we have to think about the urban informal economy. If it exists, means it is serving a purpose. So, the right of the pedestrians has to be basically balanced with the right to survival of the poor. This needs to be done. And you can conclude by saying that we should not have a punitive approach. Rather than the plan should be to make our cities inclusive, resilient and sustainable. And for that, we have to incorporate the things at the planning level itself. And then we have to see that the implementation is also done. This is the way you think. Let's take another scenario. For example, you are going through the newspaper, you will witness a certain development in the current affairs. Now you have to think that in terms of a mains answer. For example, recently we came across this particular current affairs. The issue of illegal migration in Spain's Ceuta. Now this should immediately trigger in your mind that illegal migration is also an issue in India. We have the issue of Bangladeshi illegal migrants. We have the issue of the Rohingyas fleeing persecution in Myanmar. We have illegal migration from Nepal because of the open border policy. try to analyze this again in terms of why illegal migration, how illegal migration, what are the issues, the implications involved herein, and the resolution. Now, herein, the pestle approach, the stakeholder approach, the GS paper, the topics and keywords therein will help you a lot. That's why we say that in exam, if you want to write a good answer for any given question, if you do not have much idea about it, but you have a good command over the UPSC mains syllabus and the keywords, you can frame a very good answer. But for that, you need practice too on daily basis. For example, let's consider this particular case. Okay. So again, the first question that is to be asked is illegal migration in border states of India. Okay. So the questions, right? First, why illegal migration? You can think in terms of pestle approach. And whenever we are talking about migration, you must be aware of the fact that there are certain push factors and there are pull factors. For example, if we talk about the India's neighborhood, push factors will be maybe political instability or maybe economic reason, economic fragility or distress, or it may be persecution, right? Ethnic or religious persecution. Persecution, or it may be in recent times climate induced migration. For example, many of the areas like Sundarbans are submerging. So people who were living therein have to migrate and they will obviously try to go to places which have better opportunities for them. Pull factors. What are the pull factors? See, political stability in case of India, better economic opportunities, apart from this, what? The ethnic ties. They make it quite easy for people from Bangladesh, Myanmar to migrate. The borders, for example, the porous borders with Bangladesh, or certain policy factors, for example, the free movement regime with Myanmar or the open border case with Nepal. So we have talked in terms of geography, the ethnic ties, the historical perspective. We have talked in terms of political factors, economic factors, environmental factors. Again, broadly the pestle approach. Then the next question that should come into your mind is the issues or the implications. How you will think about this? Simple. Influx of migrants leads to what? It may lead to demographic changes in the border state in long term. It may create pressure on the existing infrastructure, resources, the subsidies like PDS, which can lead to what? Ethnic clashes, give fuel to the sun of the soil sentiment, can lead to communal clashes, can lead to radicalization. Most of the insurgent groups in the northeast, for example, Alpha, are a result of radicalization. Radicalization. It can create law and order situation. And diversion of the resources. Talking about the issues, what all other things we can add? The routes which these illegal migrants or the syndicates sending them use are also used for organized crimes. So, security implications. Security implications in the form of organized crimes. I'm connecting it with GS3 security. Organized crimes in the form of fake Indian currency network or narco terrorism or arms smuggling or child and human trafficking. Or in the form of sleeper cells, terrorism, right? Also, these people generally live in slums. They are undocumented and thus blind spot for our security personals. And they can be easily used by the organized crime syndicates to further these crimes, which can have economic and political implications for the country at large. Also, it can have an impact on India and ties with the neighborhood countries. For example, it can lead to tension in the diplomatic ties. I'm connecting with it with the GS2, India and its neighborhood. The issue of deportation of these migrants can be a source of irritation in the India and its ties with the neighborhood. Then you can also write about the ethical issues. The ethical issues, for example, basic human dignity versus the sovereign control over the borders. The sovereign control over the borders. Or for that matter, from the legal perspective, it will have implications for the foreign tribunals, the deportation centers wherein they are kept. We have to ensure that human conditions are there, all these things. So basic, right? So you can think in terms of pestle approach, you can think in terms of your GS syllabus and the key words therein as per the relevance to the question asked. Or you can think in terms of your basic topics. So pestle approach, stakeholder approach, or you can think in terms of GS paper or the keywords therein, syllabus mapping, and write an answer. Now, Along with this, resolution is also important over here. What is the solution? So again, we will think in terms of short term, medium term, and the long term. For example, if we talk in terms of short term, it will be what? Enforcement of the border control mechanisms strictly. Fast track the case of deportation on the basis of profiling. And we have to ensure that this profiling is objective. Medium term, if we talk about, it will involve diplomatic negotiations, Long term, if I talk about sustainable measures to prevent illegal migration, it will be first, comprehensive and integrated border management using the best of the technology available. Next, we can go for development diplomacy in the neighborhood. So basically to curb the problem of economic migration. We can have some regional agreements to deal with this issue. Apart from this, the most crucial is in the border areas, we should have best of economic avenues, social facilities, and the infrastructure. Why so? Because they act as the first line of defense. They are the first one to identify the outsiders. In the medium term, you can also think about rethinking the available arrangements. For example, the open border with Nepal, or for that matter, if you are aware, the free movement regime along the Myanmar was also suspended. So these type of measures can be used. So same pattern is there. First, you have to ask, what is it? Why is it? Issues, implications, and the resolution, if any. Same approach. Either GS paper based or key pointers of the syllabus based, pestle, stakeholder, and you will arrive at a very multi-dimensional answer. But this is with a caveat. So you have to basically practice brainstorming daily. Then only it will pay off in the exam hall. Initially, it may take you 20 minutes, 25 minutes to think about an issue. But gradually, your brain will be wired in that manner. So, in the exam hall, automatically it will think along those lines. While you will be reading a content, a book, you will be thinking on those lines. Now, as promised, these are certain ways in which you can introduce your answer and conclude. For example, your introduction can be on the basis of a recent context from data or certain committee report, or it can be on the basis of a recent judgment of a Supreme Court or any article of the Constitution or the historical background, quote based, definition based. So conventional is definition, quote, historical background, article of the Constitution, Supreme Court judgment. You can also mix match, for example, definition along with recent context, and so on. For conclusion, you have to basically keep one thing in mind, that the conclusion should be forward looking, it should be positive, it should be solution oriented. And you can link it with national vision, for example, Viksit Bharat 2047, or $5 trillion economy, or net zero 2070, depending on the context of the question. Then you can also link it with SDG. For example, we connected the problem of uh, encroachment on the footpath, urban planning with Sustainable Development Goal 11. Then you can also link the solution with the constitutional philosophy or the philosophy of the preamble, and then simple quote or philosophy based.